A local tourism professor is warning that air travel emissions will continue to skyrocket despite industry assurances to the contrary. Professor James Higham has co-authored a study on the subject and he joins us to discuss it. Good evening.
Good evening.
How much has the aviation industry grown in recent decades?
It's grown massively in recent decades and transport now accounts for about 14% of global emissions, so it's a very significant issue when it comes to climate change. And aviation is a big part of that transport sector, obviously.
Is it expected to continue growing?
It's continuing to grow, and it's growing very fast at about 5% a year. So it's an issue that needs to be tackled.
Are there any new technologies being pushed by airlines as being more sustainable?
Well, the airline industry has promised much about technology, and that's really the nub of the issue as far as our research is concerned. Efforts have been made to use composites to make aircraft lighter. New engine technologies and new fuels are the three main mechanisms for trying to make aviation more sustainable.
But we're not getting anywhere with any of those?
Well, aircraft have got fractionally lighter and fuels have become more efficient, but those gains have become more and more marginal whilst demand has continued to grow very, very rapidly.
And were any of those things being used widespread?
Those technologies. Some airlines, Air New Zealand is actually a good example of an airline that's very, very mindful of its environmental impact. It's got a new fleet of aircraft. They're energy efficient. They do tend to fly point to point, so less of itineraries that land and take off very frequently on their international network. So Air New Zealand is an example of an airline that's trying to do its best, but there are limitations to how much can be done.
Are any airline companies or aviation companies benefiting from common perceptions of the industry?
Well, you know, airlines will speak of their commitment to sustainability, and perhaps there is a perception gain there that when airlines do talk about sustainability that they are concerned about it. But the reality is that we've got a major issue to confront here with the emissions growing from aviation, and relatively little that can be done other than reducing demand or changing demand for aviation in terms of those questions.
Are any of those companies answerable to anybody in terms of sustainability?
The global question really falls to the International Civil Aviation Organisation, and that organisation has put a lot of stock in technology and operational efficiencies, but in the absence of more direct responses to this, it's going to be difficult to address the issue.
Are there any practical ways that airlines can reduce emissions?
Very little. As long as it's jet aviation and it's fuelled by kerosene, there's very little that can be done. But the travelling public needs to be mindful of this, and we are going to need to change our air travel behaviours. We're going to need to become very mindful of the sustainability of aviation, and we're going to have to respond to that.
What is the likely impact of more aviation pollution?
Well, the issue there is that the consequences are on our global climatic system. So the impacts are dispersed globally, and we've seen extreme weather events and such like. Obviously, we've had a recent conference in Paris that has resulted in over 200 countries signing up to tackling climate change, but aviation remains outside of that agreement.
Now, onto the study that you've co-authored, which countries were involved?
So that was with colleagues in the UK, the Netherlands and Germany. Those are obviously very big travel markets, and those are travel markets that are going to need to change and change quite rapidly in response to this issue. Those are the countries where our co-authors are based, but Asia is also growing very, very rapidly in terms of air travel demand, so it really is a global problem.
How would you like to see your findings used?
Well, I'd like to see it used in terms of everyone really becoming attentive to this issue, both the airlines, the airline industry, also the travelling public. We're going to have to change our behaviours. We're going to have to step back from travelling very frequently, very far, very fast, and aviation is central to that, and we're going to have to become more mindful of sustainability issues in the way we choose to travel.
Professor James Higham, thanks very much for your time.
My pleasure.